Picture this. I'm lying in a coma after my helicopter crashed into the ocean. The doctors say, one emergency brain surgery, $1,200,000 gives me a fighting chance. My half-brother, same dad, different mom walks straight into the ICU and says loud and clear, we're not paying for her surgery. I need that money for the big deal. Minutes later, my dad and his wife, my stepmother, both sign the papers refusing the operation that would have saved my life, just so he can grab the $20 million my real mom left me in trust. What they never saw was my lawyer standing right there in the room, quietly filming every single word on video, 100% legal. I'm Devin Whitaker, 31 years old. When I opened my eyes from that coma, I didn't say a thing to any of them. Instead, in the next 12 hours, I made sure my half-brother and everyone who signed those papers lost everything they ever cared about. If you're watching this, smash the subscribe button and turn on notifications right now, because this one is wild from start to finish. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I read them all. Everything started 3 months before the crash when I finally saw who my half-brother really was. 3 months earlier, in the boardroom of Whitaker Prime Steakhouse's headquarters in Dallas, the air felt thicker than the ribeye smoke from our kitchens. Connor, my 28-year-old half-brother, slid another thick stack of documents across the polished mahogany table for the 5th time in 7 weeks. Devin just signed the internal sponsorship transfer. $20 million from your trust to the Whitaker Family Foundation. It's clean, tax-deductible, and makes us look like saints to every investor watching. I didn't touch the pen. I'd already seen 4 earlier versions of the exact same request each, with a different date, different offshore account numbers, and the same fake letterhead. I slid the papers back toward him. I'm not signing anything until an independent auditor shows me where every single dollar is actually going. Pamela, Dad's second wife, and Connor's biological mother immediately jumped in, voice-dripping with that syrupy concern she only used when cameras or money were involved. Devin, honey, you're being ridiculous. Connor has poured his heart into this foundation. Children in low-income school districts are finally getting real protein on their plates because of him. You want to stand in the way of that? Richard, my real father, sat at the head of the table staring into his coffee like it owed him an explanation. He always went quiet the second Pamela and I started circling each other. Keeping the peace had become his full-time job ever since he married her 25 years ago. Connor leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, flashing the same shark smile he used on bankers and private equity guys. Come on, sis. The Texas-Oklahoma acquisition is $480 million locked and loaded. Banks are breathing down my neck for cash collateral. Your trust is just sitting there doing nothing. Be part of the legacy or step aside. I opened my laptop and turned the screen so all 3 of them could see the spreadsheet I'd spent the last 3 nights building. Legacy, funny word. According to Nevada Gaming Commission records, your foundation wired $18 million last year to 3 offshore sportsbooks. All 3 accounts are controlled by your old Sigma Chi treasurer. Care to explain? Pamela's hand flew to her pearls. Richard finally looked up, eyes wide, mouth half open like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Connor didn't blink. He just lowered his voice until it was almost a whisper. Keep pushing, Devin. Some doors, once you open them, you don't get to close. And some accidents happen when people get too curious. 2 weeks later, I found the forged approval emails he'd planted in the company server, ones that made it look like I personally authorized every transfer. I cornered him in the underground parking garage at 2 in the morning after he thought everyone had gone home. He didn't even pretend to be surprised. End of the quarter, he said, tossing his briefcase into the back of his matte black G-Wagon. After that, I don't ask anymore. I just take. Pamela started showing up at my downtown loft, uninvited always, with some new baked good and the same script. Your brother is drowning, Devin. The banks want $20 million in cash collateral tomorrow, or the entire Texas deal collapses. He's doing this for the family name. Don't destroy everything your father built because you're jealous of Connor's vision. Richard sent one single text that night. "Please don't tear the company apart over this. We can fix it together." I stopped taking their calls. I hired the best forensic accounting team in Dallas instead. By the time I had the full report bound and sitting on my desk, I knew Connor had already bled $9 million out of shell companies and fake vendors. He was now less than 60 days from missing the biggest acquisition in company history, and the only remaining pot of money he could legally grab was the $20 million trust my real mother had locked up tight money that only released if I was declared permanently incapacitated or dead before age 35. I scheduled an emergency board call to present the evidence. Connor somehow got wind of it and convinced Richard to postpone the meeting until emotions cool down. Pamela left 17 voicemails in one day, alternating between tears and threats. Richard showed up at my door himself, looking 10 years older than he had a month earlier, begging me to give Connor one more chance. I told him no. I told him the evidence was going to the SEC and the banks the next morning. That was the last conversation I ever had with my father while I was still conscious. The next day, I boarded the company helicopter for a routine site survey over the Bahamas' new location for a flagship beachfront steakhouse we'd been planning for 2 years. I buckled in, looked down at the turquoise water, and actually smiled for the first time in weeks. I thought the worst thing my half-brother could do was destroy the company. I had no idea he was already planning to destroy me. That afternoon, I boarded the company helicopter to the Bahamas, headset on tablet open, to the new beachfront renderings, completely unaware the pilot had just taken a $50,000 wire transfer routed through a shell company in Aruba. 47 minutes after takeoff, the tail rotor failed. The last thing I remember is the ocean rushing up to meet us. I woke up 8 days later on a ventilator in the neuro ICU at Cedars-Sinai in Los Angeles. Skull fractured in 3 places, brain swelling so severe the doctors had already drilled a temporary drain. Dr. Nicole Brooks, the attending neurosurgeon, told the nurses, "My chances were maybe 65% with immediate surgery. $1,200,000 non-negotiable cash up front because the company insurance policy was suddenly under review." Connor and Pamela landed on the hospital's rooftop helipad less than 4 hours after the crash. Connor still wearing the same Navy suit he'd had on when I left Dallas, Pamela, clutching a Hermes bag like it was armor. Richard arrived an hour later, face gray tie loosened, looking like he'd aged a decade on the flight. Ethan Walsh, my personal attorney for the last 9 years, was already waiting in the family consultation room when they walked in. He'd flown commercial from Austin the second the Coast Guard notified the company. He greeted them politely, phone in one hand, small 4K camera already rolling in his jacket pocket, fully legal under California's one-party consent law, because I had signed a medical power of attorney addendum giving him recording rights in any room where my care was discussed. Connor didn't waste time. He pulled Dr. Brooks's cost estimate from the printer and waved it in front of Richard. $1.2 million just to maybe keep her breathing. "Dad, she's brain dead on these scans." "You saw the EEG, flat lines everywhere." Pamela started crying on cue, loud enough for the hallway to hear. "Richard, we can't let her suffer like this. She wouldn't want machines keeping her body alive. We have to think about quality of life." Richard kept staring at the MRI films on the light box, hands shaking. Ethan stayed silent, camera capturing every angle. Connor lowered his voice, but not enough. "Dad, the banks closed the Texas deal in 12 days. They need the $20 million cash collateral by next Friday, or the whole $480 million acquisition dies. Her trust unlocks the second she's declared permanently incapacitated. It's what she would want to save the company her mother loved." Richard whispered something I couldn't hear through the glass. Pamela grabbed his arm. "Sign the refusal, Richard. It's merciful. We'll tell the press it was a tragic accident and the family is pulling together." Dr. Brooks came back in, face tight. "Mr. Whitaker, I need a decision in the next 2 hours or we lose the surgical window. After that, even if you change your mind, the swelling will be irreversible. Connor slid the refusal of treatment form across the table like he'd rehearsed it 100 times. 2 pages already highlighted where the signatures went. Richard picked up the pen. His hand hovered. Pamela put her hand over his and guided it down. He signed first. She signed second, tears still streaming, mascara perfect. Ethan never moved. Never spoke. The camera caught Connor's small, satisfied smile the moment the pen left the paper. Dr. Brooks took the form, looked at it for a long second, then at Ethan. She left the room without another word. Connor turned to Pamela. Call the trust attorney. Tell him we need the incapacity declaration rushed through probate court this week. Pamela was already dialing. Richard just stood there staring at the floor. Ethan finally spoke calm and professional. I'll make sure the family's wishes are documented thoroughly. He slipped out before they noticed the tiny red light still blinking on his phone. They moved me to a regular room that same night. No more monitors beeping urgency, just the slow drip of pain medication and the quiet hum of comfort care protocol. The surgical team was told to stand down. Connor even shook Dr. Brooks's hand on the way out and thanked her for respecting the family's decision. I was still deep under tubes down my throat, pressure bolt in my skull, but somewhere in the darkness I felt the shift, like the temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees the second those signatures dried. The next morning, against all odds, I opened my eyes. The room was dim, monitors beeping slow and steady. My head felt like someone had poured concrete inside it, but the fog was lifting faster than anyone expected. Dr. Nicole Brooks rushed in, shining a light into my pupils, asking me to follow her finger. I blinked, stared past her, and let my face go completely blank. Richard was the first one through the door, eyes red, shirt wrinkled from sleeping in the vinyl chair. He grabbed my hand. Devin, baby, can you hear me? I turned my head, slowly frowned like I was trying to place a stranger, then pulled my hand away. Who are you? Pamela appeared behind him, clutching a bouquet of white roses. She gasped. She doesn't recognize her own father. Connor stepped in last, arms folded, watching me like a chess player who just saw an unexpected move. I let my eyes drift over all 3 of them, confused, scared, exactly the way a severe traumatic brain injury patient would. I mumbled numbers, random dates, asked what year it was, then started crying because I couldn't remember my own name. Dr. Brooks ordered immediate cognitive testing. The results were devastating on paper: profound short-term memory deficits, partial facial blindness, severe executive function loss. Exactly what Connor needed. That same afternoon, Blake Morrison walked in, my ex-fiancé, the one I'd ended things with 6 months earlier, when I caught him texting Connor about getting her out of the way. He still had visitor privileges on the old list. He kissed my forehead, told me how worried he'd been, then turned to Connor in the hallway where he thought I couldn't hear. She's gone, man. You can see it in her eyes. Whatever fire she had, it's out. Do what you have to do. I'm not waiting around for a vegetable. Connor clapped him on the shoulder. Appreciate the honesty, bro. We'll take care of her, trust me. I kept my breathing, even eyes half closed, tears sliding perfectly on cue. When the nurse stepped out for 5 minutes, I tapped the side of my Apple Watch Ultra 3 times, long, short, long, the emergency code Ethan and I had set up years ago when Connor first started getting aggressive. 30 seconds later, the watch vibrated once, message received. Ethan appeared an hour later, pretending to be a hospital patient advocate. He stood at the foot of my bed, asked routine questions about comfort level, pain management. While Pamela fussed with the flowers, he leaned over the rail and slipped a tiny wireless earpiece into my ear, smaller than a hearing aid. He whispered so low only I could hear, I have 63 minutes of crystal clear 4K video. They signed the refusal. We're locked and loaded. Your move. I gave the tiniest nod, then immediately started rambling about a childhood dog that never existed. That night, Connor brought in a court-appointed guardian ad litem, who just happened to be his fraternity brother's cousin. They ran more tests. I called the examiner Mommy once asked where my crayons were, and tried to eat the laminated name badge. The report was rushed patient exhibits, childlike cognition, unable to manage finances or medical decisions. Richard sat by my bed holding my hand, apologizing over and over, telling me everything would be okay, that Connor would handle the company and keep me safe. I squeezed his fingers once weekly, then asked if Santa was coming soon. Pamela posted a tearful Instagram story about our family's heartbreaking journey and got 2 million views in 6 hours. Blake sent flowers with a card that said, "Get well soon, stranger." I had the nurse read it to me out loud while I smiled vacantly. Every time they left the room, Ethan's voice came through the earpiece updates on probate filings, bank deadlines, press statements Connor was preparing. I answered by tapping Morse code on the watch when no one was looking. Keep the video sealed. Wait for the signing ceremony. Make it public. Make it hurt. 10 hours after I first opened my eyes, I had already turned myself into the perfect helpless victim, exactly what they wanted the world to see. And they bought every second of the performance. For the next 10 days, I played the perfect broken daughter, and they fell for it harder than I ever imagined. Connor wasted no time. Day 2 after I woke up, he brought in a private neuropsychiatrist from Beverly Hills who charged $25,000 for a 4-hour evaluation and owed Connor a favor from a Vegas weekend neither of them ever talked about. The doctor ran the same memory tests, asked me to draw a clock count backwards from 100 by 7s. I drew the clock with all the numbers on one side and counted down to 43 before I started crying and saying the numbers were swimming. His final report delivered the same afternoon. Patient exhibits irreversible frontotemporal damage consistent with permanent incapacity, unable to manage property or person. Connor had the guardianship petition filed in Los Angeles Superior Court before Sunset Emergency Calendar ex parte hearing scheduled for Day 8. He paid the expedited filing fees in cash. Pamela turned into a full-time media martyr. Every morning she sat outside the hospital in designer athleisure, no makeup except perfectly smudged eyeliner, giving exclusive interviews to every network that would point a camera at her. She told Good Morning America I only recognized her on good days, and sometimes called her Nanny. She told People magazine the family was preparing to make heartbreaking decisions. The hashtag #FOSH Pray for Devin trended for 72 hours straight. Richard visited once every afternoon, always alone, always carrying the same wilted grocery store daisies because he forgot to throw the old ones away. He sat by the bed and talked about the first steakhouse he opened when I was 6, how proud my real mom would be if she could see the empire now. I stared at the ceiling and drooled a little for effect. Connor spent the rest of his time in conference rooms at the Beverly Wilshire finalizing the Texas acquisition. He needed the $20 million in certified funds wired to the escrow agent by the close of business the day after the hearing. He already had the transfer instructions drafted, beneficiary listed as Whitaker Prime Expansion LLC, routing numbers typed, just waiting for the judge's signature. Day 5, the court investigator came, a tired woman with a county badge and a thick file. Connor greeted her like an old friend, walked her through the private doctor's report, showed her Pamela's viral interviews, played a 30-second clip of me asking a nurse if cartoons were real. The investigator spent 8 minutes in my room. I called her teacher and tried to feed her an invisible cookie. She wrote consistent with profound cognitive impairment and left. Day 7. Connor moved me to a private rehab wing he'd rented entirely, no other patient security at both ends of the hall. He told the press it was for my safety and privacy. Really, it was so no real doctor could wander in and retest me by accident. Pamela hosted a candlelight vigil on the hospital lawn that night. 200 employees in company polo shirts holding electric candles, local news helicopters circling overhead. She read a prepared statement about letting go with love and choked up exactly on cue. Richard skipped the vigil. He sat in my new room instead, held my hand, and whispered that he was sorry for everything, that he'd make it right somehow. I squeezed his fingers once and asked if the pretty lights outside were fireworks for my birthday. Connor walked in right after, phone in one hand, final escrow amendment in the other. He told Richard the hearing was locked for 9 a.m. tomorrow. The judge had already indicated approval based on the filings. All that was left was the signature and the wire. He looked down at me lying there, eyes unfocused, mouth slightly open, and smiled the biggest smile I'd ever seen on his face. "Almost home free," he said under his breath. That night, the earpiece buzzed one last time. Ethan's voice, calm and clear. Judge signed the temporary order at 4:57 p.m., permanent hearing scheduled for the morning of the signing ceremony. "They're bringing you to the hotel as the family's feel-good photo op. I'll be in the front row." 12 hours, Devin. Then we end this. I closed my eyes, slowed my breathing, and waited. The night before the massive acquisition signing, Connor showed up at the rehab wing with a garment bag and the biggest grin I'd ever seen on him. He laid a custom blush pink silk dress across the foot of my bed, the exact shade the PR team said photographed soft and hopeful on camera. Next to it, he placed a pair of low nude heels and a diamond tennis bracelet that used to belong to my real mother. "Tomorrow's the big day, sis," he said, voice dripping with fake warmth. "The Texas partners are old-school family guys. They want to see we stick together no matter what. You're going to sit front row, smile pretty, and wave when they call your name." "Easy." I tilted my head, stared at the dress like I'd never seen fabric before, then clapped my hands once and giggled. Connor laughed, actually laughed, and patted my cheek. "That's my girl." 10 minutes on stage and the banks release the final $200 million in credit. We close the deal, save 48 restaurants, and keep 10,000 employees working. "You're the hero." Pamela swept in right after with a professional makeup artist and hairstylist she'd hired for the occasion. They spent 2 hours curling my hair into loose waves, painting my face in soft neutrals, turning me into the perfect tragic princess. Pamela kept dabbing her eyes with a tissue for the photographer she'd allowed into the room, just for behind-the-scenes family content. Richard stood in the corner the whole time, hands in his pockets, looking like he wanted to disappear. When Pamela asked if I looked beautiful, he managed a weak nod and said, "She looks just like her mother." Connor had a luxury Sprinter van waiting downstairs at 6:30 the next morning, paparazzi already tipped off and lined up outside the hospital entrance. He wheeled me out himself, waving to the cameras, shouting, "Thank you for the prayers, she's a living miracle." Flashes went off like fireworks. I lifted one hand in a slow, shaky wave and smiled the vacant smile I'd practiced for days. The ride to the Beverly Wilshire took 20 minutes. Connor spent the entire time on the phone confirming the morning's schedule: red carpet arrivals at 8, press conference at 8:30, signing ceremony at 9 sharp, live stream to every financial network in the country. He ended the last call with "Tell escrow the 20 million hits" at 9:05. "We're golden." He hung up and turned to me. "You ready to make history, Devin?" I nodded slowly, eyes wide, then pointed out the window at a billboard and asked if the cow on it was real. He chuckled and ruffled my hair. "You're perfect." The grand ballroom was already packed when we rolled in the service entrance. 250 investors, bankers, Texas rancher partners in 10-gallon hats and custom boots, every major food industry reporter on the coast. A massive stage dominated the front, 2 oversized chairs waiting for the signing cameras on cranes sweeping the room. Connor had my wheelchair positioned dead center in the front row, a small Whitaker Prime logo blanket draped over my lap for branding. Pamela sat to my left, clutching my hand for the cameras. Richard took the seat on my right, but kept his eyes on the floor. Connor took the stage for the warm-up speech, voice booming, telling the room how the Whitaker family had overcome unimaginable tragedy to close the biggest deal in steakhouse history. He gestured toward me. And none of this would be possible without the strength of my incredible sister Devin, who's here with us today, against all odds. The room erupted in applause. Cameras zoomed in. I lifted my hand again. Slow wave, shy smile. Connor beamed. He truly believed he had won. The morning of the signing, the grand ballroom was packed with 250 investors, a dozen live television crews, and every financial reporter west of the Mississippi. Connor strode to the podium one final time, gold pen in hand, ready to sign the $480 million acquisition papers. The Texas partners sat on stage behind him, 10-gallon hats off, smiling like they'd already cashed the check. Connor raised the pen high. Before we make history, I want to thank my family for their unbreakable support, especially my sister Devin, who's here with us today, as living proof that Whitakers never quit. He turned toward me, arms wide, expecting another slow wave. I gripped the arms of the wheelchair, pushed myself up, and stood. The room went dead silent. I took one step forward, then another, heels steady, eyes sharp. Connor's smile froze halfway. Pamela's hand flew to her mouth. Richard looked like he'd seen a ghost. I walked straight to the stage, climbed the 3 steps without help, and took the microphone from the stunned moderator. "Good morning, everyone," I said, voice clear. Strung nothing like the childlike whisper they'd heard for 10 days. "My name is Devin Whitaker, and I'm not brain damaged. I never was." Gasps rippled through the crowd. I nodded to Ethan Walsh in the front row. He pressed play on the laptop wired to every screen in the room. The 63-minute 4K video began. Connor's voice filled the ballroom crystal clear. "We're not paying for her surgery. I need that money for the big deal. Her trust unlocks the second she's declared permanently incapacitated." Pamela on screen guiding Richard's hand. "Sign the refusal." "Richard. It's merciful." Richard's pen hitting the paper. The camera caught Connor's satisfied smirk the moment the signatures were done. The Texas lead partner stood up first. He looked at his team, shook his head once, and ripped the contract in half right there on stage. "We don't do business with people who try to murder their own blood for escrow money. Deal's off." Phones started blowing up across the room. Within 90 seconds, the ticker on CNBC flashed red. Whitaker Prime shares halted. Down 52% pre-market. Connor lunged for the laptop. 2 off-duty LAPD officers moonlighting as event security grabbed him before he took 3 steps, pinning his arms behind his back. He screamed my name like a curse. I leaned into the microphone one last time. "Connor, Pamela. Richard, you chose $20 million over my life. Today, the world sees exactly what that choice cost you." I dropped the mic. It hit the stage with a thud that echoed longer than any applause ever could. Within the next 12 hours, everything they loved was gone. Connor was arrested in the hotel parking garage at 2:17 p.m. Federal agents and windbreakers walked him past the same paparazzi who'd cheered him that morning. Charges: securities fraud, wire fraud, money laundering. 6 years federal prison, no parole. He never looked up once. Pamela lost every share she owned by 4:00 p.m. The board voted emergency removal, citing moral turpitude clauses. By 6:00 p.m., movers were already boxing her designer handbags in the Bel Air mansion she no longer owned. She left in a rented Toyota, sunglasses on, no cameras allowed. Richard showed up at my new condo at 8:42 p.m. Security called up. I watched him on the lobby monitor, shoulders collapsed, holding a single manila envelope. He begged the guard for 5 minutes, just 5. I told them to send him away. The envelope, photos of me as a child, apology letters, house keys, was left at the desk. I had it shredded without opening. At 10:05 p.m., I signed the papers creating the Margaret Whitaker Medical Trust, $20 million locked and loaded, dedicated to covering emergency surgeries for accident victims whose families can't afford the bill. First grant approved before midnight, a 19-year-old kid in Houston who needed the exact same brain procedure they'd refused me. By midnight, every major network had the full video. Stock closed down 68% after hours. The Texas deal was dead. 48 restaurants would stay independent. 10,000 employees kept their jobs because the company no longer carried Connor's poison. I blocked every number, deleted every email, changed every lock. Richard Pamela Connor gone. Not my family anymore. Never again. Blood doesn't automatically make someone family. Real family are the ones who choose to protect you, not the ones who sell you for escrow money. That was the last time I ever spoke their names.